time-sensitive matter. It's, you know, we have benefit to the larger community in terms of jobs.
No question.
Something that we're attempting to accomplish. We do have an opportunity then to amend what we do this evening if we find out there's a negative impact to the township.
Correct, that's
right?
correct.
So there's a vehicle to take care of that.
That's correct.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Just one other question, and it's very simple. I hear somebody say Yang Feng, I hear somebody else say Yang Feng. What is the correct pronunciation?
Young Feng.
Young Feng.
Should have asked that at Gowney too.
Yeah, yeah. County and Guani.
Yeah, one of the other items that everybody needs to know, I don't know how Carol came up with this 5%, but I thought we were at 867 million. You know, that gives us about 43 million. We're way above that, but that's for
My under-
another day. But
My understanding was there was some stuff that came off the book recent. There was
Not-
one that came off the book recently.
not much.
The Pelican one from a couple years ago brought us down. So
Not that much. We've never had. I mean, we've. done-
that was my conversation with her. She said we were well under the cap.
I don't know. Well under. We're close.
We-
So
we're not
that-
in danger of being over.
So that being said, this will probably be the last IFT. So if another company were to come in here, just because we're up to that cap, right about 870 million in total value, right? So we're gonna be bumping up against the cap. So if we do have another company that decides to come in, we won't have, $5-10 million in IFT incentive to give that company. And I would guess that in 2016, any personal property IFTs, like you say, come
Will
off.
will not.
Not sure.
That will not even come to pass. The new state legislature has deemed that in order to even apply for the CESA, it's not an abatement, but a removal of the CESA, you have to invest a minimum of $25 million. And this is rare to get a $50 million project in Macomb County. Most of my projects range from 1 to 10 million.
Right, I mean, we've done 500,000, 1 million. I mean,
Right, that's what
$3
I'm
million
saying.
for real
That's
building,
not that
not a
much.
problem.
And as I said, some other
we do
companies
that.
on that road are interested in meeting with us, and I do not anticipate they would have anywhere near the investment that this company has.
Right, but if those other companies come, we might, if there's even a little bit of a downturn in our property values, we could bump through that 5% threshold,
Okay,
right?
good to know, good to
mean,
know.
It's about $43.5 million if, based on 867 million in property value.
I'm glad you're
so-
sharing that. I'll look
Of
toward
course,
that
keep in mind
if
that-
people ask.
That's half. So it's
Right,
not,
it's
it's not
5%.
real investment. In other words, if it's 43 million, that's 86 million in real investment.
You can have 5% of your total taxable value in IFT, right? So,
Yes,
Understood.
right, if you have 900, say you have $1 billion, which we had 10 years ago, that would be, $50 million, right? And you're doing an IFT for $51 million. I don't see how we're possibly under the threshold. But
Because it's valued
half
at
that.
half. It's valued at half. If I make $3 million investment, it's only valued at 1.5 million.
Against that-
If I
against
really
that
invest 3
percentage.
million, it only contributes 1.5 million in taxable value. That's the reason why. You could almost say in real dollars, it's 10%.
well, no, I'm just the board needs to know that you have no more incentives to give.
Yep. And like you said,
Right?
after
I mean-
next year, it changes the picture, and we, based on my discussions with Camille, we thought we might have another one that would be coming forward. We won't have one this
yeah,
year.
we don't anticipate any
Yeah.
more this
Yeah.
year.
So
This is the end of the season and the end of the tax year and the end of the IFT personal property tax requests.
Right, because it's zero tax.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for the industrial facilities tax exemption for Yun Feng, USA Automotive Trim System Incorporated, located at 42150 Executive Drive, Harrison Township, Michigan, 48045.
Support.
We've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to close the public hearing. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkast?
Yes. All right, thank you for sharing that information and addressing the board. It would appear that item D3 on the agenda is listed as adopting the resolution for the Industrial Facilities Exemption Certificate for Yangfeng USA Automotive Trim Systems Incorporated. And there's a proposed motion. We've discussed this subject at length. Is there a motion this evening?
I make a motion to adopt the resolution for industrial facilities exemption certificate for Yangfeng Feng USA Automotive Trim Systems Incorporated for a 12 years exemption on real and personal property, contingent upon approval of the Michigan Economic Growth Association grant initiative.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Capel?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Witt? Yes. Mr. Verkowski?
Yes. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good luck.
You had to vote yes if I need to bring it back.
There you go. Let's see. Next is item F from the treasurer's office. Mr. Witt, or Mr. York, I'm sorry.
Yes, pretty simple. The library, village pass. Eventually we need to get to an elected board. This is a extremely important, board that needs to be done. They get basically $450,000 that the board can spend and hire people and do what they want, with the money, just like this board here. And that board, eventually gets elected by the people, and they are bound to the people. And, being a one-time deal, I think that we should let the citizens decide. The citizens decided to give them the money. I think the citizens should have the right to decide who should sit on that board. And while I do understand that we have the power to appoint a board. I believe it's a 6-member board, and we have received applications for that, and I'm sure that there's going to be a process for that. I just wanted to put this on here to see if the board wanted to do a special election. So the elected library board is held responsible to the citizens, and which is where that money came from, and they are subject to the recall procedure and everything else that this board is. And that's that. And my guess is gonna be that the law says that you shall appoint a 6-member board that is there through 2016. So if that's the argument, let's just remove the item.
Okay. Are you asking that it be tabled or?
Nope.
Or removed from the agenda?
Nope.
Okay. Then I guess I'm not sure what action you're proposing.
Don't we have a meeting
Well,
scheduled?
I'll make a motion to hold a special election in February 2015 to elect 6 members of the library board.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to hear any commentary on this item. For that purpose, I'll offer my support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Batanti. You mentioned something, the recall process. If a board is appointed, is it not subject to the recall process?
I can't see how it would be.
Okay,
Forecast.
so then, would this body have a recall process or some sort of a process to remove a member if we appoint someone?
Wouldn't they still be vulnerable to the same, I mean, once you're in that, it's as if you're elected. If Mr. Batanti here, as an appointed individual, wouldn't he still be subject to the same laws?
The library
As-
rules are pretty specific to this. If the subsection of that other rule about appointing is that the member can be removed in the same way they were appointed. So this board could remove members as deemed fit.
Right, so
But-
there's a removal
And it's
process.
specific to that,
So there's still
actually,
some
believe it or not.
citizen
It says it in
derived
there, yeah.
authority over
Yeah,
that
Okay,
until
Right.
election.
yeah.
okay, good.
Which is sort of funny because it's you'd think it was the other way, but the library, law is specific to that,
Sure.
removal procedure.
Mr. Batanti had seconded the motion for the interest of garnering public comment. So is there discussion this board needs, or can we open up the floor for public comment? So let's do that now, in case there's anyone who wishes to address us.
Thank you, William Bardell. I think it'd be a great idea to have an election. I think, and with keeping, well, a big thing with me is the integrity of the craft itself. And having an election, hopefully we can get and retain, if somebody runs for this election, and we can get a couple of master librarians with master's degrees in information technology or information, masters in library science and information technology, and get at least a couple of them to run and respect the integrity of this craft itself as library information technology science. And I think this is a terrific idea for our .5 mil library millage. I believe that's what it was, .5 mil. I think this is a great idea to have this special election. And like I said, I'm real big on integrity of the craft itself, and this would be the right thing to do. Like I said, it would be terrific to get a couple of master librarians with a master's of library science and information technology and respect the integrity of the craft and the citizens who voted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Serville, citizen. I agree that I think it should be put up for election for the simple reason that it makes it more difficult. That shows you that people are committed to that process and they want that job. As you know, my wife is currently running for a school board, and I know how much work it is. We've put a lot of hours in. To just come up and put an application in and say, I want to be appointed, it doesn't take much effort. So you get the truly committed people that are willing to campaign and show their stripes, so to speak, to the public, so they can get that job. And I believe the job doesn't even pay anything. So you really have to be committed. And we want some professionals that want to give back to the community, and their main job is to staff this library with professionals. So we need a professional that knows what to hire and who to hire. And that's a simple reason. And 413,000, I believe, was the number that was projected for the first year. You're talking about a $30,000 cost to have an election, no matter who pays for it. It's a small percentage of what the budget's going to be. And there also is an issue that the law does state that the elected board is supposed to present a budget by, I believe it's September of the year, to be adopted. You can't do that if you don't have an elected board. It specifically says, it doesn't say the board, it says an elected board. So that's kind of a gray area. It would have been nice if the library had the foresight to go and put this on the ballot concurrent with their millage, that the board could have been elected at that point and you wouldn't have to deal with this. But it is what it is. I think you should hold the election. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Karczewski, resident. I'm not for an election. I'm sorry. We approved for the library, the voters approved for the library. Right now, I think anybody that would spend money to be elected to the board are the same people that's gonna put the application in right now. It should be ready for the next election. But to take $30,000, if that's what an election would cost, is that, I thought that's what somebody said it would cost, around $30,000 for just an election. Now, how many people go out for election for one thing? It's not even worth the money because most of them would be absentee that would vote. The rest of the people just not gonna bother for one little thing. The people that are gonna come to be on this board are dedicated people. Yes, it would have been nice if the library had this all set to go on the November ballot. It didn't come out. This isn't something that they did. They learned from their mistakes. But to spend $30,000 for a special election, to me, is just not worth it right now. I think the people that want to run are the people that are going to put the application in. And you were elected by us. I hope that you have a public hearing on this when the people, whoever they are, so they can come and say why they would like the job. And that would be one way of the people in the township, if they're interested, they would come and hear them, why they want the job. They could come to a board meeting or have a special meeting, however they want to do it. But to spend that extra money right now, I don't think so. I don't think it'd be right. But I would like to hear from somebody from the library, what they think, how they're going to go about this, before you guys pull for a special election. Somebody from the library that's head of the library now, what are their thoughts on this?
Thank you.
Jim Senstock, 31698 San Juan. The library passed with a very, very, very small majority. There's a lot of people that don't want the library. There's a lot of people, or approximately the same number, that do. What this library board is going to do is it's going to hire a director, hire the workers, decide how much they're gonna pay. Workers that are working on a daily basis, gonna set the hours, gonna do a lot of things. A lot of financial obligations. Having watched the election, in the last election, I was not extremely thrilled at all with some of the expenditures that were made by the library committee. And then what we're talking about is basically the same people getting on there again, because the board, it's always easiest to appoint somebody that's already there. So an election, as was stated earlier, will allow the other side to put a couple people on that board. Will allow the other side to have some input into how much we're gonna pay this library director. Will allow the other side to become involved in the library. It's that close of an issue. There are a lot of people that are still extremely upset with it, that, you know what, they're looking at this and they're saying it's an issue of fairness. Let the people decide who's gonna sit on the library board. To sit there and appoint somebody and give them carte blanche for the next 2 years is terrible. It reflects back on you people. If they come in, that new library board comes in and they're not elected, and they decide to give the new director a $99,000 a year salary, guess who I come blaming? It ain't gonna be the appointed library board, it's gonna be you guys. You let them do it. It's ridiculous. $30,000 is a pittance. We're talking about a library that's going to be in existence for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Let's do it right to start out. Let's see if we can engender some support for the library after it gets up and running, because the people that are running it are representing both sides. I urge you to really, really consider putting it on the ballot for the February meet, or February. If people are not interested, they won't vote. But I think they will. I think you're gonna find out it's gonna be just as close an election as was the original library vote. So please, put an election forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there, oh,
think
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Brown.
Okay, good.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Jim Villan, resident of Duluth Street. Some of you members of the Board of Trustees know me from when we were assembling shelving 5 years ago. And I've been an original member of the working bees at the library. I first was interested in a library back in 1976, but we couldn't get enough people to sign a petition to put it on the ballot. And history shows the struggles that we have gone through in the past 2 years to get this library fully created for the people of Harrison Township. Not just for the workers who have been putting their endless hours into that, and our own finances sometimes, and the support that we've had from the people who use the library, their library, your library, not just our library. So I would urge that you not vote to have the election in February, a special election, for 3 reasons. One, already you talked about the cost, and cost in money. But there's also the cost for the people running for those positions. And I learned personally the cost of emotion and stress when we worked to get the library village passed in the past 2 years. And the struggle against the phantom opposition. Secondly, this is really just the next step in the creation of your public library. The library that Harrison Township deserves. We are the only township that has no library. I've lived here 44 years. We raised 2 sons. One son is a teacher across the road there. And when our kids were little, I wanted to take them to the library. There's no library here. And we were paying $20 at that time to use the Mount Clemens Library. Now it's $200, not per family, per person, per card. As we've learned and as we explained in the millage proposals, the cost to the individual taxpayer would be considerably less than $200 that you would pay to use Mount Clemens Library or Macomb Library. The Macomb, I can't think of the hyphenated term, I'm sorry. Clinton Macomb, excuse me. Now you can use them because we passed the millage and we've been accepted into the Suburban Library Cooperative. Not only use those libraries free, but all 21 libraries. And soon, we are now in the process of going through with the state, different steps that have to be done, and this board that would be created would do, that would link in to 400 libraries throughout the state of Michigan. Now, that's wonderful. Now, the third reason that you have to do it is because it's the right thing to do. It's the next step, as I said. And I just want to close with restating the fact that, excuse me, let me back up a moment. I would think that whoever is appointed on that board would be positive people for the continuation of the creation of this library, not opposition. And finally, I just want to restate the fact again, that this library was created by volunteers for the needs of the people of Harrison Township. And I hope that everybody is enjoying it. The people that come there and use it, the seniors, the people who use the computers for job search, the kids that come for childhood programs, and all the books and our facilities that are there. And you want to know something on a personal level? I built those shelves and I carried thousands of books to that, from the county library to that library that we have. right there. And you wanna know something? I can't read a single one of those books. I have macular degeneration. My eyesight, my left eye, I can't read. My right eye is just hanging on. And I'm doing it for you, and all the people watching on TV, because I care. And I know you care. And I know that you would provide proper supervision and monitoring of whatever persons and action done by the appointed board, which is the proper thing to do, as council said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Melissa Goins. I'm currently the volunteer director at the library. I would like to say a few things that, first of all, I urge the board to appoint a 6-member library board to go ahead and take place. Delaying the issue any longer is only going to hinder the process moving forward. We've had a number of items that we've been looking into. Our current library committee has been a little reluctant to make financial commitments for another board that will be in place shortly. So there's a lot of things that are currently being put on hold that we'd like to implement. I was contacted earlier today by the Suburban Library Cooperative. They wanted more information on when we would have ebooks at Harrison Township Public Library. Many of Harrison Township residents are already visiting the local libraries, and they're trying to use ebooks. Unfortunately, that's something that we have to purchase ourselves. They can't use those at other libraries. So that's a large purchase, around $6,000. That, you know, we're putting on hold until we have paid staff that can show people how to use their e-equipment. Because with that service, we know that patrons are gonna come in and they're gonna wanna say, show me how to use my e-reader, show me how to use my Nook, show me how to use my iPad, how do I download books? And we're currently not equipped to handle that with our volunteer staff. Not many of them are familiar with the technology that's necessary in order to be able to teach people how to use those things. So there's a number of things that are put on hold that we'd like to move forward, but we can't until there's a permanent board that's in place. And I understand that this is a temporary board until the election in 2016, but we'd like to keep moving. SLC's already been implemented. We've contacted Melcat so that we can do interlibrary loan throughout the state of Michigan with 400 other Michigan libraries. And ebooks is next on our list that we'd like to tackle. So as soon as we can get a board in place, it would be beneficial for us to keep moving forward and provide the services that we promised during the election.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Board members?
So I do have a comment. Okay. And with regards to the money, right? I think that an election goes right hand in hand with that. We bill out the taxes in December. You can't go and hire a library and staff and this and that. You might end up collecting $10,000. You might end up collecting $20,000. You're not gonna have a full collection of that money until February 14th. Probably really your date of really having all of the money really is around March 1st, because then we get the delinquent money from the county. There's gonna be a certain portion that of taxes that aren't paid that we get through the county. So I don't know that any board wants to go and start hiring somebody based on, you know, a December 1st tax collection. You know, that's rolling the dice on whether you're gonna have money or not. We don't know how those taxes are gonna come in. So doing a February election certainly coincides with getting your full bank of dollars into the library. But more importantly, in 2016, we're going to have an election for these positions. I don't think anybody, if you want to be on that library committee and you're committed to it, I don't think anybody should be scared to put their name on the ballot and run for that position. That is just the process. I know some people might not like it, and I think back to the supervisory interviews, we had, I think, 10 or 12 people sit here and interview for that position. What happened when election time came out? None of those people put their name on the ballot. It's much different when you're appointed and you're elected. When you're appointed, you really don't have, you know, you have a responsibility, but when you have just you go, you run for a job, you're elected, you just have a sense of responsibility to that. And Mr. Sunstock hit the nail on the head. I personally don't want to be responsible if something goes bad. I don't know what people are going to pay. I don't know anything about those contracts. I don't know how it's going to be structured. It's an independent board that has independent money that is, well, we approve the budgets. If somebody decides, and I'll just think of something outrageous, somebody wants to pay somebody $300,000. Not going to happen, but I'm just being outrageous here. There's one employee, we're going to pay him $300,000. Well, that comes back to us. And I understand there's two ways to go with this, but I guess when I look at this, I look at just punting the ball at this point, letting the citizens have their election. They decide who it's going to be. Then that way, it never comes back on me or on this board. It's on the citizens. They elected those people. And, you know, whether it's the most popular person or the smartest person, you know, or not, I don't know. But it's on the citizens. It's their library. It's their board. And I think we should do an election for it.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's a little bit of irony that I need to address. I was appointed.
Right.
So I don't necessarily agree with some of the comments about how an appointed board member thinks, but I'll leave that go. But I do think that there is a distinction in a situation where there's one part of a 7-member board that's appointed. The other 6 members of this board were elected. So I think there is a bit of a distinction. I just want to bring that to everyone's attention regarding this particular decision. I think there's a difference when it's one person on a 7-member board versus a 6-person board.
Mhm.
Just my comment.
And my comment wasn't about you. As a matter of fact, you were here. I wanted to do an election for your position.
I understand that.
And I think I made the motion to appoint you at the end
I
of
don't
the
have a
day.
problem with appointing a board. I don't have a problem with any blowback coming back to me or anybody else in this board. If we appoint a board and they act irresponsibly, the residents have chosen us to be the leaders of this community. So if the library board turns out to be irresponsible, the board that we appoint, then we should be responsible for their actions. But I'm not concerned about that library board at all. They've done, I mean, the board that we haven't appointed yet.
Mhm.
But anyone that we appoint, and for example, we appointed Bill. And I think everyone would agree that Bill's been doing a fantastic job. So I think that this board has the ability to appoint a sound library board that's gonna do a good job for the community. Look what they've done already with nothing, with no pay. I mean, I have no problem with it at all. I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not.
Sure. Well, we discussed, I'm sorry, we discussed earlier that if this board does have the authority to appoint and there is no authority for voters to recall, then that authority to, I suppose, remove is transferred through the appointment process. So, you know, if somebody chooses to say, well, I think we need to employ somebody at the rate of $300,000 a year, I think by your own account earlier, we have that ability to remove that board and right that ship. This appointment process is not a choice. The statute's very clear. The law says we must appoint a board. The issue is when we choose to elect a board. And depending on how you read this, you could read it a couple different ways. Punting is not an option. We're elected not to punt. We're elected to lead. People, that's our choice. We appoint a planning commission. We appoint a zoning board of appeals. We do that by law. We've been doing that since those boards existed, and that process works fine. I don't think this is a question of saying whether or not the appointment process is flawed. It works, and it's the norm, not only in this statute, but in several other statutes for other boards that we have to have by law. This comes back to an issue of what Mr. York said, in my opinion. First, I think the cost, but the second is to punt. I don't think the statute tells us we should punt. The statute tells us we should lead. At some point, there should be an election, and we received an opinion from our legal counsel saying that that's the way that we should proceed, but I believe, of any time to possibly have an election, I believe February would be the worst possible time. It doesn't allow the appointed board to function for very long before there's an election process, the potential for a whole bunch of changes occur. There's nothing in the statute that supports that we should do an election in February, and I just can't justify the costs.
I'll make it March or April or June.
Well, you can't do March or April.
I mean,
but-
if you're gonna justify the costs, I could sit here and argue all night long about where we spent $25,000, for other items that probably most people would deem, probably wasteful spending. I mean, I could sit here all night arguing that point. But at the end of the day, when I say punt, my point being when I say that is, you're gonna have an elected board in 2016, just like this board is gonna be elected in 2016.
Correct.
Right? When you're elected, that comes with responsibilities and all sorts of other stuff. Campaign finance and your name in the paper and all of that. And that's fine. If the board wants to appoint somebody, that's fine.
Well, it's a matter of law. We have to appoint.
But I don't think if you said, okay, we're gonna do an election in June, I don't think that the state's gonna come down and say, township, no, don't do an election. They will allow us to do an election. There's no doubt in my mind.
And if that was the intent of the state act that we're operating under, then I believe what they'd say is at some time after the voters choose to have a millage to fund the library, a special election should be held, but it doesn't say that. The act says the township board of trustees should appoint a library board. That's what it says. If it was their intent to say, establish the millage and then turn around and have a special election or elect officers, then I think the statute or the act would read that way. So
fine.
I'm not comfortable at this point reading the act in the plain language that it says, listening to the opinion from our council and saying, but instead, let's just go spend 30 grand and have an election. So I don't know if there's any other comments or.
Make a request,
call for the question?
All right, well, I think we can do that.
Bill can rescind his motion and that'll end it, or we can vote.
Sure. Well,
It's up to you.
we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Batin.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't interfere. I was just signaling, Darren, that it was your motion.
Right.
But Mr. Batante seconded it for purpose of discussion.
Oh, I see what
So
you're saying.
listening to the discussion, I'm asking Mr. Batante if he removes his thing, we don't even have to vote, but,
I
or we
understand.
can take a
Right,
vote.
that's what I got. So we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Batanti to set a special election for February of 2015 to elect six members to the library board with terms ending 11/20/2016. Mr. Witt, will you please take a roll call?
Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Batanti,
Yes.
Mr. Brado,
No.
Mr. Capral,
No.
Mr. Tominello,
No.
Mr. Witt, no, Mr. Verkest.
No.
Motion fails.
All right. Thank you, board. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item G1. Board members, the collective bargaining agreement with AFSMI is set to expire on December 31st, 2014. We need to begin negotiations with the union soon. There is a need to establish a negotiating committee, which would consist of 3 board members, and members would need to be available during normal business hours. We've had various people participate on the negotiating committee in the past.
I'll jump out and say I would be very interested, given that I have, the second most AFSCME employees underneath me being involved in the negotiations there.
Fair
I'm
enough.
more than happy to do, I mean, the bottom line is, over the last probably 3 years, the 3 full-timers have done it and were available, and
Yep, I know that I would like to be a member of that committee. I don't know if there are any other board members that have an interest in serving on that committee.
I mean, we have history, we know what needs to be done. We deal with the grievances, we deal with the grievance process, we deal with the employees every day.
If you were looking for an outside board member, I'd be willing to volunteer, but I would yield to, your expertise.
Yeah, well, it's open. I mean, any board member who expresses an interest can do so, so I'm good with that.
Then I'll withdraw the interest. I'm just indicating that if there was a need.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to form a three-member committee to negotiate the ASME collective bargaining agreement consisting of Mr. Burkess, Mr. Witt, Mr. York. 3 full-time officials. Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. York. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is a very similar agenda item, just dealing with the GELC, basically the supervisory union, 5-member union. And we need to, again, form a 3-member committee to negotiate that collective bargaining agreement. And I would also like to serve on that committee.
And I would as well, and it might make some sense that it's the same unless there's an overriding interest, just because some of it's gonna overlap. That way
Sure.
we can sort of do,
Yep.
run meeting and do a meeting.
Supervisor, I'll make a motion to form a 3-member committee to negotiate the GELC collective bargaining agreement consisting of Mr. Burkess, Mr. Witt, and Mr. York. Support.
All right, we got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Batanti. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next, item G3. Board members, this is regarding our discussion regarding the DDA. At the September 17th workshop regarding the possible formation of a Downtown Development Authority, or DDA, the Board of Trustees discussed passing a resolution of intent to form a DDA and calling for a public hearing. This action would require notification of the proposed district to be given to all taxing authorities for that district. That would also provide an opportunity for those taxing authorities to opt out of any tax capturing provisions associated with Public Act 197 of 1975, which is our DDA Act. We asked our consultant to help in the drafting of a resolution of intent, which would include a proposed date for a public hearing for Monday, December 1st, 2014 at 7 p.m. So in the board packet is the proposed resolution along with a picture of the DDA district.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution of intent to create a downtown development authority and authorize the clerk to make all necessary notifications per the state act.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt.
And just to say that the public hearing will be scheduled Monday, December 1st, 2014 at 7 p.m.
Fair enough. Is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Batanti.
And just to speak to the motion, and the reason I was so gung-ho about it, but this is just the first step. This isn't the final determination. This just starts a shot clock for bodies to be able to comment on it. It's not a final decision at this point. This doesn't bind the board, but it allows us to begin that more thorough fact-finding to see if other entities would be a willing partner in this Downtown Development Authority process. So we could have a discussion on the merits at the end once we get whether that feedback from those communities. This is just the start of that process. So that's why I think there are some serious questions that need to be answered before we get to that final end, but I think this is just to start that process so we can have a more thorough conversation in the end and have all the facts for the residents when we make a decision.
In other words, Darren, let's not have the discussion tonight.
No, not at all. I want to make sure everyone knows. I mean, there is some discussion that needs to be made, but it's.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Stated another way, this is not the action that this board will take to establish a DDA, but rather
Quite a.
basically kind of dipping your toe in the water to see if other taxing entities are going to support this or oppose this DDA. That public hearing, December 1st.
So that's a special meeting then?
That would be a special meeting. Yep. Yep.
So the issue is, and I'm not gonna take very long, because we had a workshop, and I was quite vocal at the workshop of my opposition to a DDA. You know, I guess, I just feel that the area where we're doing a DDA, you know, the primary thing is downtown. It's a downtown development authority. Well, when I look around Harrison Township, I don't see what anybody could be considered a downtown area, like you go to Richmond. And then once you find a downtown area, then you have to look and say, okay, it's been here 60 years and it's run down, so we need to capture our fire and police taxes so it'll prop it up. I disagree with this whole DDA concept, and we'll talk about that later. But I guess for right now, I'll just hold my comments, because the simple fact is, if we put this out and none of the other entities come back with allowing us to capture their taxes, my guess would be it's just gonna be a dead issue, so why beat it up right now?
True. Absolutely.
So, I'll just leave it at that.
All right, any other discussion? We'll open up the floor for public comment.
Yes, William Bardell. What I want to say about this DDA situation is, and I talked about the workshop, and I'll say it, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it a million more times. What recourse do we have when somebody buys 5 properties and doesn't do anything with them for a number of years? I'm not saying 1 year, it's not up to code, it gets bulldozed. We have a problem in this township about properties that need to get bulldozed. The housing board is, I don't know, all but disassembled. I don't know, they got a nice little group there that are trying to do something in this community, and I have, for the life of me, have no idea on God's green earth why you wouldn't want to get those 5 fellows together and put their brains together and figure out how to straighten up this community and tear down some of these blighted houses. Not that they've been there for 3 months or 6 months, or little grannies trying to put in storm doors. We're talking about bank-owned, multi-billion-dollar banks that are getting interest for 0%, and they won't tear down their stuff. And I want to say it again, what is our recourse on, in this downtown authority that we're probably going to get, whether, I don't know if we are or not, but probably will, with tearing down the blighted houses? If a guy's going to build a bar or a water park or a bar or whatever, and he buys 5 properties and he mothballs them for 5 years, it doesn't tear them down and plant sod, even if he doesn't put up a water park or a bar or whatever, what is our recourse? And I know it cannot be the way we've been doing things. We've got to have another recourse. We cannot disassemble our Housing Board of Appeals and not have these 5 fellows get together and discuss this stuff and work to better our township. I mean, good things can look good in the newspaper, but I care about the township. I don't care about he said, she said, this, that. I care about the township. What recourse do we have on these properties that once we get the downtown authority in here, how long can they sit on them and have the grass grow 3 feet high and have all this blight? There's going to be in-between times. The devil is going to be in the details. I'm going to go back to Ross Perot in 1980. The devil is in the details. Let's work out these details. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. That's all right, no problem.
Oh, are we still on the downtown development?
Yes, sir.
DDA, yes.
Okay, I'll hold off.
Okay. Then I guess there is no further public comment, so we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. We discussed the issues relative to the possibility of blight growing. We talked about it probably at just about every meeting, and I think I've answered the question several times. The establishment of a DDA does not limit the township's ability to address blighted properties. Every tool that's available to us today is available to us tomorrow, even if a DDA is established. So our ability to address blighted properties or enforce our ordinances remain in effect independent of a DDA. So whether we have a DDA and someone buys 5 properties and doesn't take care of them, or whether we don't have a DDA and someone just chooses on a whim to buy 5 properties with the intent of making an investment or some business decision, The same rules apply. Our ability to enforce ordinances is not limited by the DDA. The DDA does not create any additional enforcement options that I'm aware of, but it doesn't limit our options.
To answer Mr. Bardell's question regarding the housing, Mr. Verkest and our attorneys have shut down the housing, that housing blight committee. Hasn't been around in a year and a half, so you'd have to ask our attorney. He set it up and then he shut it down.
Great team.
Yeah, I agree.
Great team.
Yep. Well, I don't know that I'd agree with Mr. York's comments, but
I went back and
Sort of outside the scope of the conversation.
Yeah, it's really
for
not-
this
it's
motion.
really
Mr.
not the-
Bardell asked the question,
but it's
and,
really
and
not
you answer the
germane.
questions normally, except the ones that you don't want to answer, right? We sit at the end and everybody asks 10 questions, and we sit here for an hour, and you answer all their questions. Mr. Bardell asks a question that you don't want to answer, so you just blow by it and answer it. That's the correct answer.
Yeah, but usually we get
Ask
truthful
the attorney.
answers.
right, yeah, I wouldn't agree with that answer, but,
Rob, did you
If we
shut it
could-
down?
If we could stick to the scope,
Right.
let's
That's fine, I'm
proceed.
just
think-
answering a question.
sure.
Rob just
I
answered, he
appreciate
said, no,
that.
he didn't shut it down. so let's
If
move
it
on.
wasn't shut down, then why isn't it met in 2 years? It's pretty simple. Where's it at?
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Batanti to adopt the resolution of intent to create a downtown development authority and authorize the clerk to make all necessary notifications per the state act and hold a public hearing on Monday, December 1st, 2014 at 7 PM. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes. Thank you, Board. Okay, next is item G4. Board members, at the June 23rd, 2014 regular board meeting, the Board of Trustees approved language placing a road millage on the November 4th, 2014 ballot. It was discussed that we need to inform voters and explain the policies which this board adopted at the July 28th, 2014 regular board meeting. I've prepared an informational postcard. I requested quotes for the printing and mailing of the basically half-page color postcard to be sent to all households with a registered voter in the township. The last count we had from the clerk's office was $8,594. Manhattan mailers, I'm sorry,
Huh?
8,594 households.
That's the most expensive mailing ever.
Yeah. Manhattan Mailers was the lowest bidder at $2,941.90. I think Mr. Capel pointed out possibly a math error, but the reality is when, there's really two steps to that process. One step is the printing, the other step is the postage, and they actually bill them separate. So I don't know that they're gonna be right on the nose with that number. It kinda depends on what the final list comes from the clerk's office. But I recommend that we contract with Manhattan Mailers to print and mail postcards to every household with a registered voter in Harrison Township. Their cost was $29.41 90. I guess I'd say a not-to-exceed cost of $3,000.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Supervisor.
All right, we got a motion by Mr. Tominello. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capral. All right, discussion, board members?
Yes. We had an incident about 2 weeks ago, and I won't get into what it was, but Adam happened to bring over we had a Economic Development Committee issue. Adam had brought over a thing about, regarding what you're allowed to spend tax dollars on. Well, through that, there just happened to be, one of those items was, you cannot spend tax dollars on a private road unless it's 100% reimbursed. Right? So, to say that we're gonna use 5% of the funds collected will be in a grant fund for condominiums, you're not by law gonna be able to use that money for that because it's an illegal expenditure under the law.
Well, that's the first that I'm hearing about it. I don't know if, Mr. Huth, if you have any,
That's what it says, private roads. And then Adam and I had a discussion about 3 days later, and Adam had said that I believe it was one of the other laws, we could do an SAD on the private road if it's reimbursed 100%.
Well, first I gotta ask, when did you discover this bit of information?
Well, Adam gave it to me about 2 weeks ago on a Monday.
I see.
On a Monday, we were trying to get, the EDC was doing a fundraiser, and we were making a donation to the Veterans Association at Selfridge. So he came over with the law, and it says you're not allowed, it says you're not allowed to spend money on flowers or dinners and this and that. And one of those items was private roads. As a matter of fact, it said in there, we're not even allowed to let the Little League use our fields over there.
Good luck with that one.
I couldn't agree more. I'm not gonna be the guy that cuts Little League.
I don't know that answer. I feel like I know that answer, but if I could have even tomorrow to respond, I'll respond to the whole board.
But I think that we need to be aware, and I had mentioned it to Adam at that time, that we weren't gonna be able to use that money for the grant fund.
Now, you didn't mention that to me,
And-
but I would have loved to have heard it then.
Well, I
Yeah,
did.
I
Because-
sure would've-
because
No,
we were
because
having a
what you
discussion,
mentioned
Adam,
Sooner than 9:30 at night.
Adam, we were having the
would've
discussion
been
about the
helpful.
private roads.
You said, hey, on that special assessment district, does that bump up against this law? And I said, well, no, because that's fully paid for by them through the special assessment process.
Right, so-
You didn't say, hey, Adam, I wonder if this is gonna bump up against the millage language. So to say you did is misrepresenting the facts.
Well,
But regardless of the
I didn't
history
make
that.
the law, I'm
Yep,
just following it.
Mr. Eric, regardless of the history that got us to this point, it would seem prudent that this board would get an opinion from our legal counsel to clarify that. I don't know that it would change the action that we choose to take, but it would certainly potentially change the verbiage. So I think that, and I think it's also important then to state that there's two components in here. One is private roads as it pertains to what most people would perceive to be a public road, but happens to have never been dedicated. The second component of that would be condominium. So I think those are two different private functions, but certainly we'd want to encompass that, I think, in that opinion.
Absolutely.
Well, the statute just said private roads, so.
And just so everybody knows, we didn't ignore that issue. We did have conversation with Mr. Newmer as part of the road committee, and we discussed that exact issue, so
Yeah,
it'd be good to hear what Mr.
Yeah,
Newmer said.
when we had talked to him, he said he'd seen similar expenditures
Right.
from other types of millages, so this wasn't just pulled out of nowhere, I mean,
But so that we might have a little bit more discussion on what the intent was relative to what the committee discussed, and also what we discussed when we drafted the policies. What we really are ultimately looking for is fairness. So if we were to say that Mr. Batanti lives on a public road that when it was constructed, it was dedicated to the use of the public, say, for example, your typical residential road. And Mr. Tominello lives on a road that happens to be a private road. It happened to be that for whatever reason, when that developer built the road and people bought lots, it was dedicated to the use of the property owners. So it's not a public road, it's not literally owned by the county. And Mr. Witt happens to live in a condominium association, and just by sheer luck, they each own a property that's worth about $150,000, which is not unreasonable. There's condos and single-family homes that are all in a similar price range. Each of these three individuals would be paying the same property tax under this millage, but the argument was that Mr. Batanti would receive full benefit because his road would be completely repaved, utilizing the millage dollars. But Mr. Tominello would, in essence, not receive some benefit because he lives on a private road, but he'd be taxed the same amount. And Mr. Witten wouldn't receive any benefit because he happens to live in a condominium association, even though he's paying the same property tax. So the language that we proposed in that policy was to say that public roads would be 100% repaired, or at no cost. The millage would cover 100% of the cost. Private roads would receive 25% contribution as long as the property owners that live or have rights to that private road would eventually dedicate it to the use of the public, so that we'd eliminate these private roads. For the most part, they're a nuisance. There's something lingering from the 20s that were just never dedicated. And we'd recognize that we'd set aside 5% of whatever we collected into a fund so that folks who happen to live in a condominium would have the ability to apply for grants overseen by the 7-member, citizen committee to be able to look at a way that they could utilize the tax dollars that they're paying in to get some immediate benefit on the property that they own. So that was the intent. Through this process, we hadn't discovered that it was illegal, but in fact, we'd been told that there were other examples of similar millages, but I think ultimately what we need to do is to find, out from Mr. Huth, a legal opinion as soon as possible, because we want to get this mailing out.
You certainly don't want, at the end, all of a sudden you have this money and then you find out that you can't use it,
Well, you can use it, you just couldn't use it for that
Well,
intended
right, but if we're
purpose.
gonna advertise,
No question
once
about it. We
again,
certainly don't
you know-
want to, propose something and then not be able to follow through.
I didn't even know that until until that was put on my desk.
Sure.
You know,
Mr. Chairman,
it's-
isn't that language, and maybe I'm mistaken, isn't that language as part of the ballot proposition as well? The 5% holdback to account, is that in the ballot?
No,
Is it?
no, that was the whole reason why I'd asked that we adopt a policy so that we could inform the voters what our intents
All right,
were.
my mistake.
No problem. We do have a motion. Is it fair to modify that motion to say pending, Mr. Huth's advice, regarding the verbiage?
That sounds reasonable, Mr. Supervisor.
Mr. Capro?
Yeah.
All right. So we do have a motion. We had discussion. I don't know if there's further discussion, if we should open up the floor.
There is one, I would make one, just like people, got up and talked about the election and how much it costs, this is a waste of money and we shouldn't be spending money on this card. No problem putting in it with the water sewer bills, but, you wanna save money. You don't wanna spend it on the election, but we're gonna spend it on a card because we're gonna spend money on what we want to and not on other things like the election, just on our political agenda.
Well, I would completely disagree with that.
No,
I
you
think.
can't say on one
Hold
item
on a minute,
that
Mr.
you're
York.
spending money and
Hold
you're
on.
not,
Hold
Ken.
on a minute. Hold
You're
on.
completely
Mr.
inconsistent.
York, please. I
Completely
listened to,
inconsistent.
I listened to what you had to say, and I'd like to respond to your comments.
You can respond till the cows come home, it's a fact.
Okay. This isn't a question of what somebody wants, it's a question of what this board of please, let me finish. It's a question of what this board of trustees decide.
Right.
If it is the intent of the board of trustees not to send out a postcard, that's perfectly fine with me. I think it would be a mistake because I think there's a lot of people who are not gonna be informed. And the fact is, the way that they're informed about most every ballot proposal or item on a ballot is usually through a mailing. It's what all of us did, and it's what I receive for every proposal I've possibly seen. This is not a pro or a con, this is informational, trying to answer questions so that when people go to the ballot box, they're informed. But it's not a question of what I want or someone's political agenda. If this board wasn't interested in talking about a road millage and putting it on the ballot, they wouldn't have formed a road committee, they wouldn't have funded it to the tune of $8,000, they wouldn't have sat through a workshop to hear what it is, voted to put it on the ballot, and then voted on the policies of how the money would be spent. It's simply not realistic to go through all that effort and then not inform the voters. So
Right, I'm
I
just
disagree
pointing out
with the political agenda that you
I'm
described.
just pointing out that, we don't wanna do an election year because we're wasting money, but we're gonna spend $3,000. That was my point about the election. We spend money regardless.
Sure. Are there any other comments, or can we open the floor for
Mr.
public
Supervisor, I
comments?
do have a comment.
Sure.
I know back, a few months back, we talked about, getting this information out to the voters so they can, have an intelligent decision on what they want to either support or not support as far as road repair. And, the other thing that we talked about that I haven't seen that I'd like to see is we did talk about having some type of town hall or some type of informational session. So, the whole thing was to get this word out, to let people know what they're gonna be voting on, what it means to them, because it means different things to different people depending where they live. So I would like to see if we don't have a lot of time, but I would like to see if we might be able to set up some type of town hall where we can, put the word out and get people in the meeting room here and sort of share the same information and answer any questions we could.
Fair enough. All right.
Didn't we already do that? With the workshop and stuff?
We had workshops with
I thought we did.
Yeah, I don't believe, not to the extent to what you
Yeah,
just described.
And I don't think we were firm on, I think it was sort of when we were still talking about what should occur and what shouldn't occur and what was, I think we changed some of the parameters. So now, we've had them set for about a month and a half. I don't think we've talked about those parameters that are set up at this time.
I mean, honestly, we should have probably got this out like 3 weeks ago prior to the
Well,
absentee
and
ballots.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think, when people read it, it's fresh in their mind. 3 months ago, people are gonna go to the polls and say, what was this again?
But see, you can also just do a mailing to the absentees. and then do a mailing to the general.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't wanna discriminate between classes. I think we just need to say across the board.
Whatever.
All right, can we open the floor for public comment? All right,
Can I get my turn now?
Good.
Bill
I tried
Serville,
3
resident,
times.
taxpayer. First of all, you knew about this a long time ago. You set the ballot language long ago. Why are you waiting till the 11th hour? And I assume, Mr. Verkest, you're the one that's going to make this informational piece up. No one else is gonna be able to see it before it's mailed. I think that, okay. Is that the piece?
I
yeah, it was
guess,
in the back of the room.
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I think it was here tonight, so I don't know when it was done.
Okay. But you made a statement that there's been informational pieces on all kinds of ballot initiatives.
Someone wants to look
I've
at
been
this.
living here since 1978. I don't remember seeing very many of them. Normally speaking, take for instance the last millage we had. There was no informational piece sent out that you're gonna have the 3-year half mill for the fire department. It was just done. And, you know, it was put on the ballot. You made a motion and you put it on the ballot. So you're changing the process to suit your needs. But going back to what Mr. York was talking about, I'll give you the exact what happened. I made a request for 2 checks because there was a motion at the EDC to give money to 2 veterans groups. I went and took it down to the assessor's office, the accounting office, and about 15 minutes later, Glenn came down with an excerpt from the law that says public funds cannot be used for private use. Now, immediately, Mr. York tried to contact Mr. Huth, and he also contacted, I believe, our, help me here, Mr. York.
Auditor?
Our auditor. And there seemed to be a difference of opinion, but Mr. Witt, you were aware of this, and you even stated that once the argument was that this was a private function that we were fundraising, and you said once it went into the EDC coffers, which is part of the township, that it became public funds. There's no doubt that a tax millage is public funds, and it's very clear, it spells it out. And I believe the word is shall in there. So to put out something that indicates, and you've already done the damage, people that went to the workshop that live in condos and live on private roads think that they're gonna at least get some benefit out of this. In addition, why are you only notifying homeowners? What about the businesses that pay this tax? Don't they have a right to know what's going on with it? If it's gonna be informational, many of those business people live here. And even if they don't, they still have a right because they pay. So if you're going to do a mailing, which I disagree with, unless you're gonna allow a counter mailing, it's like the State of the Union address. Let us have a say. It's no secret that I'm against this whole thing. I think SADs are the proper way to go. You're not gonna make everybody happy here, and you know that. When it comes time, everybody's gonna say who's first. And no matter how you set it up, it's not gonna be fair to everybody. It's impossible. But that said, where is this is exactly what you're planning on putting on a postcard? You're not gonna be able to read it if you're gonna try to fit all that on a postcard.
Smaller version.
Yeah, there's like
Well,
a 1
then-
page.
Okay. I wish somebody had told me that was back there. But why wasn't it in the packet? It wasn't in the board packet. I just looked at the board packet. That's what I was looking for, to see if there was something, some backup information. But why are you bringing this home here today? Why didn't you put this on 2 weeks ago so somebody could evaluate it? You know, I have a problem with this myself. You've put informational stuff in, and it's not really informational. It's slanted towards what you want. And I believe that's what this piece will probably be too. I can't say because I don't have time to read it here. But I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Karczewski, resident. I'm not for this mailing. First of all, you already send out, Adam, you already sent out the ballots. Just about everybody that's got an absentee ballot voted. Don't send one to my house, because you know where it's gonna go? Right into the garbage. It's gonna be a waste of money. If you wanted to do something like this, you made this, you put it, the language, what, in June, if I'm not mistaken? Is that when it was, June? When did you send out the next water bills? July? Something like that? When, there was water bills that went out, weren't they? Why didn't you stick it with the water bill if you wanted to give some information? The people that are gonna vote, of all the ballots that go out, I bet you, how much percentage is the absentee of those people that are gonna come to vote? Most of them is gonna be absentee. Not that many are gonna go to the polls to vote. This is not no big election, even though it's for the governor. You ain't gonna see that many people out there to vote. I worked the election. It's not just Harrison Township. It's no matter where. Chesterfield, the whole thing. I mean, I sat there for hours with nobody ever coming in on an election like this. But if you want to send this information, you should have done it before. Not now. It's less than a month. Most people voted that are gonna vote. We vote absentee. So I think this is a waste of money. If you want to have a town meeting, go for it, and let's see how many people show up for that one.
Thank you.
Jim Senstock, 31698 CN1. This is an advocacy piece, very clearly an advocacy piece, and that's illegal. You can't ask the question, why isn't the county fixing the roads, and not be advocating? The county is fixing the roads. Maybe not as fast as you want, but they are fixing the roads. You can't say, when will my road be repaved? It might never be repaved. In fact, the majority of the houses in this township live on roads that won't be repaved over the next 20 years. You got the problem with the percents that you're giving away. Those percentage that you're promising in this thing is an advocacy. And you know why? Because you're trying to influence those voters, those condominium voters that are gonna be treated unfairly. Those, what was the other one? Well, them especially. They were gonna be treated unfairly. That's your own words. You just said it. This is an illegal mailing. It's done at the wrong time. It should have been brought forward and showed to everybody long before tonight so that everybody could have got some input into it. It's just plain advocacy. Look at the pictures. Oh, wow, that's one terrible looking road. Do we have that many, have any roads that even look like that in the township? I doubt it. I drive the township quite often too, Adam.
You have been on Shoreline.
Or Hazel.
Or Hazel.
Or let's look at this.
Or Ballard.
Do you think they're gonna put this kind of road with the white lines and the yellow on any road, any private or public road in Harrison Township that's residential? They're not gonna get those nice wide boulevards. That's advocacy. What the hell are you trying to do? Let's look at that big piece of equipment there. They don't bring those out to the residential roads. This is an illegal piece. I will guarantee you, if you send it out and you approve it, I will file a complaint with the Secretary of State's office on it, and I guarantee you, they'll come back and say it isn't legal. In fact, you don't know that I haven't already done it. So, don't waste the money. Let's let the people decide. Right now, there's 2 or 3 weeks left. Let the people decide whether or not they want to spend this kind of money for roads. And $25,000 for the pass and $62,700 for the private roads. Let's find out if I want to pay for that. When I paid for a special assessment on my street 4 years ago, or 5 years ago. Do I want to pay for it? No, you won't influence me, but you're trying to influence the condo owners, you're trying to influence the people that think they're going to get something for free. It's not going to work. Like I said, it's an illegal piece. Don't go there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just
Hold on a
say,
second.
oh, I'm sorry.
Is there any other further public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Mr. Young?
I would just say, and I don't know that, this is where it says, why isn't the county fixing the roads? And it says, Public Act 51 is a state law that regulates spending for road maintenance and repairs. The Macomb County Road Department is prohibited by the act from spending more than 50% of the cost to replace local roads without matching that does sound, if you read that, right, and you don't know what's going on, you would say, yeah, that means that South River, Jefferson, somebody could interpret that as local roads. Now, we know here that it's not, because if you go to the next paragraph, it says, all roads are divided into 3 groups. Local roads are typically residential subdivision roads, right? So I know that that the intent here is that you're saying local roads, or whoever wrote this, right? I'm not making comment on, I'm just saying that can be misconstrued to say that the county is not gonna fix Jefferson or South River or other collector roads. I think it could be worded maybe a little better, or just, I don't know.
Sure.
Is it the local?
See, the problem is when you say local roads, I bet you if I took a poll here before just saying that, and I said, what are local roads to the residents? I bet you, or the citizens here, I bet you most of them would say that Jefferson's a local road.
Well, they would say that Harrison Township, anything Harrison Township is
Right,
local.
right. We're defining a local road.
Yeah, I think if you could fit the
as-
word, if you could say local residential roads or something, but I mean,
Yes.
but again, here's the danger in.
Local
and one second.
residential would be
Here's the
better.
danger in doing it though, is, I mean, you heard the concerns about slipping into an advocacy piece. Local roads is a very clear legal definition within the scope of the law. So when you begin to define things beyond the scope of the law, you're going outside of what, I mean, you're taking a stance as defining that beyond what the law defines it as. So that'd be my only concern with doing it. I think it makes sense, but I think if the amendment to the motion that says pending attorney's review includes taking a look at the clarity to ensure that we're not sending out an advocacy piece is included in that review,
I think local
then-
residential roads
I'd
would
be
be
happy
much,
with adding
much
that.
better.
But I just
because
want to,
it-
if we expand
know.
what Mr. Huth is looking at, to make sure we're
Yeah.
not tripping up.
Well, it literally says, local roads are typically residential subdivision roads. That's the language in the piece. Now, let me address some of the comments. First and foremost, I have a binder here, or a folder, with about a dozen pieces that I used as a reference from Isabella County, from Tuscola County. I can go through them, and anyone can review them if they'd like to. Grand Traverse. I used the format that they used. I've even got a piece here from the Clinton Macomb Public Library where they sent out an informational piece, and whether you like it or not, I pirated some of it. Number 2, the questions. I can tell you why I put these questions down, because these are the questions I get asked every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Maybe there's days I don't get asked the question. But a basic one in almost every piece, what is a millage? Some people don't know. I started there. The second question that most folks want to know is, what is it going to cost me? Because if it's $1 million, they're not interested. If it's $5, they don't have any more questions. They say, okay, all right, now I understand what the cost. How come the county isn't fixing the roads? If there's a question I hear all the time, it's the road department. The road department should be fixing the roads. I tried to explain literally what I was told by the county highway engineer when he pointed out in Public Act 51 the language that said why he's not doing it, and he'll never do it with the current language that's been in place since 1951. Isn't Lansing working to fix this? Well, I heard they're working on $1 billion. They're working on $1 billion for collector roads, secondary and major thoroughfare roads, regional roads. Another question people say, well, you're going to pass a tax, and if we vote for it, pretty soon you're just going to spend it somewhere else. I answered the question. No, you pass a millage that says it's for roads, it goes to roads. Doesn't mean you have to vote for it, but that's what it's for. Well, why don't you get grants? That's a great question. There are grants available, but they're not 100% grants. Right now, the county's has $2 million for the second year in a row in their budget, available at a 50% match. We talked about it last year. Nobody was interested. Nobody came forward. There's potentially $2 million available on top of this that we could apply for grants. Another question people always ask me, well, what about my road? When is my road gonna be repaved? Sure, you're gonna do that, but you're gonna make sure all the board members get it done. So we address that with the policy. We'd form a committee. And how will the funds be spent? This is basically a description of the policy that this board adopted. Now, if Mr. Huth says there's flaws in the policy that this board adopted, we can take that out, we can make changes to that, but these are answers to the questions that I've been asked. I truly hope this millage question passes, because I do believe it'll result in an improvement overall in the township. But the second best thing is that it doesn't pass, because it isn't the responsibility of this Board of Trustees to make a road millage or to force a road millage. What we did is we formed a committee. We looked at all the funding options. We narrowed it down to what we thought was the most efficient funding option. We reported it to the board. We voted on it, and as a board, we decided this was the question to ask. November 5th, we'll either have a road millage in place that'll address our roads, or we won't. But November 5th, when a person calls and says, well, what are you gonna do about it? I can say, well, here's what we did. We hired the engineering firm to research all these different options. We did an assessment of all the roads and a grading of all the roads in the township. We assembled all the costs. We came up with what we thought was the best way to do it, and we asked the voters, and the voters said no. That's okay. That's a fair answer to this question. All we're looking to do is make sure that we answer the questions that a lot of people are asking daily. And I'm sure it's in the clerk's office. I can't speak to your office, but these are the questions that I get asked regularly. These are the answers to those questions. I think it's important that Mr. Huth take a look at that, see if there's some language in here that's advocacy language.
There is not.
Right.
I've looked at it. It's fine.
Thank you. But if there's a problem with the private roads, then we will go ahead and take that out, if that's a problem.
We should look at that one more time, can make
Sure.
sure that we're all on the same page.
Right. And then the other side of the postcard has the ballot language. We're informing the voters. A couple of questions were asked about the timing. Those are legitimate, good questions. I should have had this piece before the board at least 3 weeks prior. We had 3 weeks between the meetings, and I lost track of the time. That's my mistake. I don't think it means that it shouldn't be done, but I do believe that I should have had this out sooner, and I'll take responsibility for that. But I still believe it's responsible for us to inform the voters, regardless of how they vote. I think we owe it to the people who elected us to inform them. And I don't think $2,900 is a significant cost to give them that information. We've spent almost 3 times that much so far just in the study itself. So, but I'm good either way. Like I say, this is to me, this is the single biggest issue that people come to me with on a regular basis. Certain times of the year maybe more than others, but come springtime, we're gonna be hearing about it again. What are you gonna do about it? Well, here's our options. You can decide if you choose to do an SAD, that's fine. Vote no on it, go for the SAD. That's a fair option also. We're just giving the voters options. Are there any other comments, or would we want to vote on this motion?
Mr. Supervisor or Mr. Witt, what is the percentage of absentee this year, do you know?
As far as total of the electorate, or, I mean, I can tell you right now, we've issued ballpark 2,500 ballots. We've maybe gotten 250 back. But even those, like, let's say we send something out to somebody, that the board decides to do this, they get this piece, they read it, and they change their opinion, whether they voted for or against it. Up until election day, they can come into my office and say, Mr. Clerk, you know, I changed my mind on a ballot issue. I'd like to spoil my ballot and re-vote it. That is acceptable. It happened several times today where individuals, actually, I know I got it, and it was from our state representatives concerning state proposals in the mail today. And I know a couple other people got it because they came in and said, you know, I was confused about the whole wolf thing, and I got this, and I wanna change my vote. So that is something available to people. So that did occur. It does occur. It will continue to occur regardless of this piece. So.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Caproll to contract with Manhattan Mailers to print and mail postcards to every household with a registered voter in Harrison Township at a cost not to exceed $3,000, pending the review of the language by Mr. Huth. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Next is public comments. We'll open up the floor for public comments, 5 minutes in length. It can be about any subject you choose.
I have a question. Since I live in the neighborhood, and there, quite a few neighbors have asked me, we've heard that St. John's been sold for $250,000 to a group called Valor Center. Yes, it's out there. Valor Center LLC. When do they come to you to tell us what they're putting in there? Okay, now, since it was a hospital, just say they want to put a nursing home in there. Do they come to you for that? If they want to use it for anything else, do they come to where? I would really like to know that, okay? And there's, everybody that lives there, they're asking me this question, and I said I was coming to the meeting and I would ask it. So if you'd please find out and let us know. Second of all, I do have a question about the roads, if you don't mind answering that. The roads like in the middle of the township that are still have septic tanks, when you do these roads, say this past, and you do that road, is that paying also for the sewers and the water hookup? Is this all coming on my money too? Or does the homeowner have to pay more money to be hooked up to the sewers? Or is the sewer money coming out of the sewer department? How's this gonna work? Because we have a lot of dirt roads in the township. And those are the roads that really need to be fixed. I mean, I could probably name quite a few roads that are pretty bad. As you know, I drive one of your buses here, and it's, my bus is in for repairs quite often because of the roads and the not just your roads. 19 Mile Road is just terrible. Little Mac is another one. They're redoing Little Mac, but you should have seen it before. But for in the township, that is one of the questions that I'd like answered. On a dirt road where there is no sewers, they still on septic tanks, when you put in the road, are you putting sewers in there at the same time? Because I remember that's why Ballard couldn't be done because they said we didn't have sewers. Now we have sewers there and they're hooked up. But some of those people did not have to be hooked up to the water system if they didn't want to. They still had wells. They could use their wells. They didn't have to be hooked up. So that is one of the questions, and I think a lot of homeowners would like that. That would be a wonderful, you want some information be put out there, put that out, because that's a lot out there that people would like to know about. Those are some of the questions.
Thank you.
How you doing? William Bardell. I got three little things I want to talk about real quick. The first one, I know at a prior meeting, Mr. Axtell said that the money was let out to remove that membrane over there across the street from Jimmy's tackle shop and bait shop, and I know Mr. Batoni told me that was going to be removed, but I had so much going on, and I didn't basically write down the date and the time, and he said that was going to be removed. But what I want to know is, I'd like to know, I know in the private sector, we always, in the private sector, it's always, how much is it and when's it going to be done? And no safety problems. So what I'd like to know is, the money was let out for that membrane sitting over there across the street from Jimmy's bait shop off Jefferson. It looks like something out of a Woody Allen movie. It's got like hairs and stuff growing out of it now. They cleaned the sewers out and left it there, and it's not been done yet. So I'd like to know when that membrane's going to be removed. Again, the money was let out. Now we need a date. When is it going to be done? That's what they do in the private sector. The other thing I'd like to talk about real quick is coming up to the Planning Commission is going to be a proposed outdoor media sign that's going to be 48 foot wide 14 feet high, and it's 48 wide by 14 feet, the size of the billboard, and 70 feet high. And as I said at the public hearing at the Planning Commission, Harrison Township needs another billboard like we need a hole in the head. Nobody advertises with billboards unless you're going to Frankenmuth and it says 5 miles to Frankenmuth and Bronner's Christmas store, back when there was no houses out that way. People advertise on Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. So if this guy gets this, all these guys are gonna wanna come in here with a 48-foot wide, 70-foot high billboard. We don't need any more billboards in this township. That's blight. The other thing I wanna talk about is with these houses that need to get torn down, I think we have a group of 5 really nice fellas that have their Housing Board of Appeals meeting, and I think they're passionate about the community. Why don't we let these guys do their work? Delegate and entrust. You still check them, but you delegate and entrust. We got 5 terrific gentlemen who care about the township. Turn them loose and let them do their job on the Housing Board of Appeals. Let's take care of some of these houses that we gotta tear down. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody.